Hello and welcome to Inspire, our video series where we talk to interesting people and share their learning. Today we are lucky enough to be joined by Darcy Small, co-founder of Kua. Hi Darcy.
Hey Hugo, how's it going?
Good, thank you. Let's get started by talking about the world of coffee. The Australian coffee market is worth over $5 billion, and most of it is going towards keeping everyone running, keeping on going around Australia. But Kua stands out. They're using the industry to sustainably support the Ugandan communities. For everyone not familiar with Kua, could you please give us an overview of what you do?
Sure. So Kura is a social enterprise. We're based here in Sydney. And at the highest level, we do world positive coffee for workplaces. And what that means is that 100% of the profits that we generate through selling coffee go back to our farming communities to fund a climate resilience program. And here in Australia or here in Sydney, 100% of the coffee grounds that are used after people have drunk their coffee are collected by us and redistributed to local community gardens.
Oh, that's amazing. And in the community gardens that they use to fertilize the soil, or how exactly are they used?
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. We have a partnership with the Randwick Community Centre. So every fortnight when we collect coffee from our companies, we do a stop off at their place and drop the coffee grounds in the hot composting bins. And those are turned into a really nutritious compost that are then used in the urban garden. And that grows food for local participants at the community garden. But they also use the coffee grounds for composting workshops and to share with people how resources like coffee should be used in ways other than ending up in landfill.
Oh, that's great. I'll have to check it out next time I pass by. And in Uganda, how does that side of the company work over there?
Yeah, well, it started around about 3 years ago. Before then, have you had a cup of coffee this morning, Hugo?
Unfortunately not. I'd be more awake if I did.
I've had my one cup of coffee, and I've pretty much had one cup of coffee ever since I started university. But 3 years ago, I wouldn't ever stop to think about where that one cup of coffee came from. And then I ended up on an engineering visit to Gulu, which is a little area in the center of Uganda. And myself and a guy called Brody, who's also studying engineering at UNSW, were working on a smallholder farm. And we met a local student there called Daniel. Now, Daniel had grown up in this region called Mount Elgon, which is where Uganda's coffee is grown. It's this beautiful extinct volcano with misty slopes, and it looks like it's straight out of a picture book. But talking to him about his experiences drinking coffee, growing coffee, we realized that they were completely different to our experiences drinking coffee, and there was a complete disconnect between those two stories. And we realized that in order to make sure that as coffee drinkers, we were not contributing to problems such as, essentially keeping poor coffee farmers poor by contributing to an exploitative supply chain, we really had to connect those two stories, to connect crop to cup. So that's how Kua really started, and now we use our profits. There's two things that we do in terms of engaging with our farmers. So one is we buy direct, basically by bypassing the middlemen. We're giving them access to a specialty coffee market that is in Sydney, which means higher prices. And then the second thing is that we reinvest our profits to the same region and ideally the same farmers. And that allows them to intercrop their coffee plantations with native trees, which mitigates some of the impacts of climate change. And it's very much a work in progress. And we've developed that over the last 2 years. But yeah, we really hope that, I guess, by buying coffee in that way, it doesn't, I guess, keep the problems going that we found out about when we first went over there. Yeah.
It's really extraordinary to see how the small things like a cup of coffee can make that much difference. What changes have you seen in the communities, positive changes have you seen in the communities as you've been traveling over there and seeing the impact that Kua has made?
I think one of the most interesting things, in 2019, so we launched in January of 2019, and that was our first year of commercial operations. And we had initially a local impact partner. So they did work in Uganda, but they were headquartered in Sydney. but their work wasn't specifically focused on climate change, which was the primary issue for our farmers and the primary issue for us, I guess, as social entrepreneurs. So the end of 2019, we went back to Uganda to review that impact side of our business model and see how we could really almost close the loop on the way that we were doing impact. And we found this program called Trees for Global Benefit, and it's run by a local environmental trust. And basically what it does is it looks at the problems of climate change specific to the area of Mount Elgon. So they're now experiencing, rather than predictable harvest seasons, it's erratic cycles of rain and then drought and then rain and then drought. And meanwhile, that's converging with a global coffee market that is pushing the prices down and down and down. So not only are farmers less able to predict their yield, but they're also having to kind of expand their farms to maintain the same level of income. And when they expand their farms, they chop down native trees, which then means that with this random weather pattern, the whole slope becomes very susceptible to landslides. Oh. So what this Trees for Global Benefit program does is basically connects the farmers to a global carbon market, and means that they can actually have a financial incentive on top of the income from their coffee to plant native trees, starting to engage in reforestation, which sequesters carbon and stabilizes the slopes, and basically means that they're not really falling into this cycle of planting more and more coffee, becoming more and more vulnerable to climate change, and eventually ending up with an unsustainable enterprise. So we, at the moment, at our current volumes, we have about 75 farmers that are gaining access to that program. And it's pretty linear. If we double the amount of cups that are drunk in a year, that'll grow to 150 and so forth. So drink more coffee is the message.
That's really great to see. And it's amazing how you can, even join that to greater difficulties that we're facing around the world, like climate change. Being part of a coffee charity, how many coffees do you actually drink a day? And in the beginning, where you actually lived in your coffee house with everyone else, how many cups of coffee did you drink a day then?
Well, I try and tell people that I drink 3 because I want everyone else to drink 3, but really I probably only drink 1 in the morning, although it's a double shot. And then if I'm having a slow day, I do like having a cold brew in the afternoon. So yeah, somewhere between 1 and 3. I find any more than that, I get too jittery and I don't get any work done.
Oh, that's fair enough. I know I'm quite susceptible to coffee, and so I did a barista course the other day, and I came back, and because I was trying all the coffees I made, I was literally shaking at the end of the day.
That's the thing. I mean, we get our coffee, we buy annually, but then every now and again we try different beans from different farmers or different regions, and you have to put them all out on the table and taste not only that new bean but also your old beans to understand what the differences are. And on those mornings, that's when you feel very, very jittery. Tasting days.
Yeah, you'd be very awake those days. Having been lucky enough to interview another young charity founder earlier this year, it's really interesting to see what keeps you guys motivated and following down your paths. What would you give as advice in hindsight to encourage someone who's following a path like yours?
Yeah, interesting question. So the way we did it was Brody and I came up with the idea in 2017, and then towards the end of 2018, the team grew to about 6. But as a charity, there was no real access to capital in the way that for-profit startups might seek investment. And we had this problem of having 6 people that were relatively involved, but were also facing burnout and pressures from uni work and all these other things. And we went and hired an Airbnb basically to do a weekend workshop and a getaway with the team. And it went really, really well. And we did all these design thinking things and planned out what we wanted to achieve in the next year. And everyone was very motivated. And someone had the idea of, well, why don't we just continue like this and rent a house together, and it'll almost be like this workshop just continues for the whole of the next year. And we actually all thought it, crazily enough, we thought it was a good idea and ended up renting a share house in Maroubra. And the 6 of us lived and worked in that share house for 1 year entirely unpaid. And that's really what allowed us to move from having no customers and no source of income to enough customers to basically then pay the staff that were going to be working on it in 2020 and onwards. But I wouldn't recommend that to people. I think that it really tested our small team dynamics, really tested our ability to communicate, and really tested our motivation to continuing to work with Kua. I would say that what did get us through, and that other companies can probably learn from, is that being really clear about why you're there. So for us as a team, we're really passionate about climate change. We're really passionate about connecting people in Australia to the issues of climate change that are kind of becoming more evident in other countries. And we have developed a team culture where people have a lot of ownership over their own roles, which means that they can then bring creativity and experimentation to their work. And I think that drives a lot of internal motivation as well. So if you have a top level goal that everyone believes in, and then a team culture that really lets everyone thrive individually, that's probably the best way to stay motivated when you're starting something that is inevitably going to be difficult.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And you guys really jumped in on the deep end there.
Yes.
What do you think are the next steps for both you and Kua?
Good question. So we always had this kind of aspirational dream where we would grow Kua in Sydney and then open source the model, and rather than just sourcing from Uganda and selling in Sydney, we might be able to source from Papua New Guinea and sell in Melbourne, or from Colombia and sell in Canada. And eventually there would be Kuas run by young people all over the world. And fair enough, like that was a very exciting model. But it was one of those goals that we were working towards in a dream-like sense, and not actually having targets and activities on paper that were leading towards that goal. It was always just very far in the future. So when COVID happened, so March earlier this year, and initially we thought it wouldn't make an impact, which was poor foresight, probably by me. But 2 days after we had a planning meeting of, will it make any impact? And we decided just to write it out. We got one email from a company saying we're going to pause our order, and then a flood of emails with about 90% of our company saying, oh, we're going into hibernation, we don't need coffee. And so in what seemed like 2 days, we pretty much our business or our source of income evaporated, and we very quickly had to have more serious conversations around where we were going. And those conversations for the first time were asking not just where does Kua want to end up, but also where do the 4 team members want to end up, and what are our kind of financial and psychological runways. And it turned out that we all had our own personal dreams. I mean, I studied solar energy, and I'm still very interested in that space. And we all wanted the opportunity to pursue things maybe other than Kua within, a time frame of 1.5 to 2 years, which meant that the aspirational goal of having Kua in cities all around the world was not as realistic as we perhaps pretended it would be. So it was really interesting that COVID sparked this conversation, and it meant that we almost scaled back our dreams just to have the Sydney hub financially successful as quickly as possible. And our models show that we can by the middle of next year. And so now that we're gunning for that, we really want the Sydney hub to be a successful social enterprise, whether we're working for it or it's someone else amazing that's being paid a fair wage to work for it. And that means that it will, in theory, last forever. And at that point, we can then reassess and say, hey, do we want to go back to that replicating model where it's in new cities, or are we really proud of what we've built and we just want to see that last forever? So at the moment, we're in a little bit of a survival mode, but very much gunning for financial sustainability.
It'd be, amazing and great to see you guys fully sustainable. Reading through some information on you, you mentioned quite a few times that you've actually been passionate about entrepreneurship and startups. Is this the first startup you've actually tried?
Yes, like the first startup on paper. But I've recently come to the realization that I'm accidentally a bit of a serial coffee, I wouldn't say entrepreneur, but serially involved in coffee. So in high school, we had a little coffee cart that we ran for teachers, and that was a lot of fun. And I'm a big fan of my hospitality teacher that kind of allowed us to do that. And then in the first year of university, or my second year of university, I lived on campus. and the coffee on campus was terrible. So we set up a little coffee cart that basically just serviced the 200 or so people that we live with. And funnily enough, that we left and gave that to the next student to run. And I think I passed it the other day, so it's still in survival, although I think that no one's really sure of the origin story. But that's cool because it's almost 5 years down the track now. And then we have Kua, which I would say is the first, real business that actually exists and does impactful work. So I would say if I had more experience, Kua would have started a lot more quickly because I would have had more mistakes to draw from. But I think the first one, you're pretty lucky if it does survive. And then hopefully in the future, if we start something else, we've got a lot of learnings to bring with it.
Well, I know statistically most startups don't survive, so it's amazing to see that yours does and it can make such a profound difference.
Yeah, no, it's been surprising for all of us, I think.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we've got questions for, but if you'd like to find out more about Kua, you can easily catch them on their Instagram page. Otherwise, get out there and buy some coffee from their website to help support them through this current time. Thank you so much for joining us today, Darcy.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Hugo.
Now I'll hand everyone over to Ning and Muskin, who will continue our segment, Investigations of Interest. Thank you.
Hi guys, welcome to this week's podcast. Today we'll be talking about paper centrifuges. So like the name suggests, it's a centrifuge made with paper. This is an idea developed by Manun Prakash, who works in the Stanford bioengineering department. The idea for this is that it works like a regular centrifuge, but it's a lot cheaper and a lot more convenient, so it can be more accessible in rural communities and places that necessities, I would say, like electricity or stuff like that. So unlike traditional centrifuges, the paper centrifuge is light and portable and also affordable. That makes it very ideal for rural usage because you don't have to worry about how to transport it there or how to get it working. The centrifuges are very important for analyzing blood, and they're needed for examining a lot of diseases such as malaria or HIV.
So what makes it inexpensive?
So basically, we have this paper centrifuge here, because like when you think about normal centrifuges, it's like those big, chunky, like metal equipment that's like heavy, really expensive. So like when they make this paper centrifuge, it's only like a few pieces of cardboard and some strings, which is like very affordable compared to the regular ones, and very portable as well, I'd say.
What are those brown things at the end? Are those handles?
Yeah, so basically what you do is like, you see from the picture, they have vials of blood that they put on the inside of those cardboard, and then they can spin it, which separates the plasma and stuff. I'll explain it a bit more here. So basically, it works similarly like those old twirly toys. It's probably really old, but when I was young, we had those like disc-shaped toys that have like 2 holes in the center with a string going through them. So the strings are then attached to the handles at both ends of those strings. And then what you do is like you pre-spin it a little bit, and then when you pull it really fast, the disc starts to spin. And then if you keep on pulling, for some reason it just continues to spin. So I don't quite understand how the physics work, but it's quite satisfying.
A body remains in motion unless acted upon. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, so like I said before, the blood is placed in small vials between the cardboard, and then the cardboard discs are spun by pulling the handles. So when the centrifuge is spun for around 1 minute or so, the centrifugal force will separate the plasma from the red blood cell, which is what we need to like test those diseases with.
So does like the plasma go to one side and then the blood or something goes to the other side?
Plasma should go like on top of the red blood cell. They should separate into separate layers.
Oh, that's so cool.
Oh, here I have a little bit on the principle of how it works. So basically, here we see like the string is all like twisted up. It's like twisting onto itself. So that's how it basically works. Due to how like the string coils called hypercoiling. This is when like string coils a lot, and then it will start to coil on top of existing coils. So it's like double coiling. I don't really know if it makes sense, but yeah. So that's how we put it simply.
And then you let it go and then it keeps spinning, kind of like that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and then it keeps on spinning. And then when it reaches, it is finished spinning, like the momentum keeps it spinning, and then you spin the other direction, and then the coil starts again. And then when the coil does the same thing, it spins the other way. It's a bit complicated.
Yes, I remember like, you know, when you like have a skipping rope and then you spin it and then it comes back and like hits you on the arm and then it goes the other way. It's like that.
Yeah, that's how it works. Might be a similar mechanic. So according to my quick research, the hypercoiling can rotate a paper disc like the paper centrifuge up to speeds of 125,000 rotations per minute, which can generate up to 30,000 Gs. And that is impressive even compared to like conventional centrifuges. Together with its portability, non-electricity reliance, and the cost that falls below $1, if you mass produce this, it's a very useful and quite well-designed alternative compared to like traditional centrifuges, and especially when traditional centrifuges are not available.
How much is 30,000 G? Like putting it into perspective.
Let's see. If we talk about rocket launch, like I think regular astronauts only experiences 3G during launch off. So like a rocket launch is already pretty impressive. And then that's 3Gs, and this can generate up to 30,000 Gs.
I wonder how it like does it. Like how it gets so fast. Like how fast was it acceleration? Yeah.
The speed is 125,000 rotations per minute. I'm not sure about like the speed as in like meters per second, but that's still a lot. You can't even see the rotations, I'm guessing.
Probably. That sounds so fast, like that many rotations per minute. Like you would think it's like it sounds like maybe something like an actual centrifuge machine. Like it sounds as fast as that, but without the actual machine. Just like some cardboard string. Yeah.
I think some of the regular centrifuges, like the lower spec ones, only need like 30,000 rotations per minute or something, but I'm not too sure.
It also seems like quite a sustainable design because there's no electricity being used and no mechanical parts for it as well.
Yeah, definitely. And the parts like the cardboard and strings are both like recyclable, so like there's not much burden on like landfills and stuff like that.
Not much. It's also easy to make as well, so you wouldn't need to train anyone specifically to make it. Like you could teach everyone how to make it.
Yeah, even if like it wasn't available for sale, you can probably make it yourself.
Yep. It's like that. What's that saying?
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Teach them how to fish or something like
Yeah,
that.
you teach them how to farm or something. It's sustainable because even after people in communities can continue making it by themselves whenever they need.
Yeah,
And then it's like easier to teach other people as well because it's like a really simple technique of like cardboard and string and just spinning it.
yeah. It looks like not that difficult.
Is there any other humanitarian engineering projects like this?
Yeah, I think at EWB, like we also have some similar ones that encourages the development of low-cost decentralized technologies. One of the current focuses is on like assistive technology. So like stuff that supports people, that's community driven. One of them is like right now is a project called the Technology Development Project. It basically aims to support people with disabilities to access agricultural livelihoods. So you can find out more about that on our website. Before we finish, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodian of the land in which we are based, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So that's it from us. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope to see you guys in 2 weeks' time.
Bye guys! Bye.